Hey everybody, welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. David Denman's here with us, actor in the brand new movie Puzzle. I've seen him in The Office, a bunch of great movies. David, great to have you. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Back in your old stomping grounds in New York.
I am. I literally lived like a block and a half from the studio for all through college.
It's pretty awesome. We'll get to the Julliard part of your career in a little bit.
Sure.
But take me back, little kid in California. How does acting and directing kind of come into the fold for you initially?
I always wanted to be an actor from the time I was little. I remember, seeing, I saw this movie Black Stallion when I was a kid, and I was like, I want to be that kid. And then E.T. came out, and I'm like, I kind of look like that kid. I want to be an actor. And no one in my family had anything to do with acting at all. I mean, so they were just, what do we do with this weird kid who constantly is putting on shows and stuff? And they supported me, which is great. But yeah, I remember just from the earliest age wanting to be an actor, and then, you just sort of follow that until you get into school. And luckily I had a really great, theater teacher in high school who encouraged me, and I kind of just found that path, and, here I am.
So you mentioned a couple of movies like E.T. Were there certain actors that you kind of looked up to at that point, directors, anything like that?
Well, at that time, I was too little to really look up to them as actors,
Right.
But
just as people,
but as people
guys,
the kid from E.T., Thomas, I don't even know, Henry Thomas, right? I think his name is. I just loved him in that movie.
Right.
He was so good. And now, as an adult, you look back on the audition tape for that. I don't know if you've ever
that's
seen
incredible.
that. And you're like, how did that kid do that? But I was around the same age when that movie came out, and yeah, of course, when you're that age, like Spielberg and stuff was just like, and still is, one of the greats. But as I got older, I started, like when I was at high school. This is back when you could rent, videos.
Go to Blockbuster.
Go to Blockbuster, and that's all I did. I went to the movies. I worked at a video store, so I brought home movies all the time, and I would see all these old movies from the '70s, and I became obsessed with like Gene Hackman and Paul Newman back in the day, and Al Pacino and De Niro, like all these amazing actors that came out of that, like in the '70s. So those were the people that kind of inspired me, and then I saw, when I was in high school, I saw Henry V with Kenneth Branagh, and I was like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but I want to do that
I'm into
someday.
this. Yeah.
And so then I started reading Shakespeare and kind of getting obsessed with that, and so that kind of is what got me to want to go to an acting school. And I remember there was a kid when I was in high school who said, he was applying for Julliard, and I didn't know what it was, and I was like, what is that? And he's like, oh, that's a school that Robin Williams went to, and Kevin Kline. I was like, really? Oh. And then I took a double take. I'm like, wait, you can go to school just for acting? Because no one in my family went to college, so
Right.
for me to go to college was like not even thought of. And when I knew I could go to school for acting, then I was like, okay, now I got even more of a focus, and so I ended up auditioning and came to New York.
That's pretty incredible. So take me back to the Julliard audition. What do you still remember from that day?
I remember it being like, I had to go to San Francisco to audition because they only audition in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. So I drove up to San Francisco, and I remember just being, just a little terrified, to say the least. You're in a room with like 100 kids, and they're working you through like some improvs, and you're pretending to be animals and stuff like that, and then you do your auditions, and then they put up a list of like callbacks, and they put a list up of callbacks, and there were 2 names on it out of 100 kids, and I was just like, oh my God. And it was me and this actress, Sada Ramirez, and so we both got called back, and then we had to come back like in the afternoon to meet them, and I was just like overwhelmed, but I had like so over prepared. I mean, they were like, he was like, you're supposed to do 2 monologues, like a classical Shakespeare
Right.
and a contemporary. So I did that, and then in the callback, they were like, do you have any other pieces? And I literally named off like 6 pieces. I'm like, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And he was like, okay, just do the last one.
Can you just do one?
Yeah, just do one of those. And I was like, okay. So I did that, and then they had me sing a song, and that was that was when I realized that you didn't have to be a singer to get into Juilliard, because I sang so badly that when I was done, Michael Kahn, who was the head of the program, said, "You sang about 11 different keys." And I said, "Yeah, well, I was trying to hit them all." And he
Wow.
did not laugh. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well." And then I got in.
Well, I guess my acting's good enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is an acting school. It's not a singing, you know, like you could go to school for opera, but I was not applying for
Wow, that's quite a story. So you get to Juilliard.
Yeah.
And you're living in the city. And we were talking before, New York City back in the mid-'90s, late '90s, a lot different than it is 20 years later. So what was the most striking thing about that area that you're going to school in?
I mean, you know, Lincoln Center itself didn't change that much, but you know, I lived a little further down in the 50s, and I remember right when I first started going to school, it was a little sketch to go down near like Times Square, and this is like before Disney bought that theater, and everything kind of changed. It sort of happened while I was going to school. I remember it evolving as you know, I moved into the area. But now it's like you've got restaurants on every corner, like, and it's just, you know, luxury apartment buildings everywhere, and as safe as, you know, you can be in New York City. But I feel like the whole city kind of has evolved like that, you know. And I mean, for me, I remember I hadn't been back to New York in a while, and I came back after September 11th, and I remember walking across the street, and some guy was like, "Hey, hey," and I thought, "Oh man, we're getting mugged. This is not good." And he goes, "Where are you going?" And we were like, "Oh, we're looking to go to this restaurant." He's like, "Oh, it's right over here. Boom, 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 boom. Hey man, thanks for coming to the city." And I was walked around going, "What is
like, where am I?
happening?" Like, you just see these arms come around. People like just, you know, embraced each other so much. I mean, maybe now 20 years later, whatever, or not 20 years. I guess it's 17 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years.
But like maybe it's a little gone back a little bit
Right.
to like. Get out of
The colder
Yeah, the
times.
colder times of New York, but to see New York evolve over the years has been pretty wild.
So obviously being a college kid in New York, there's nothing like it. I went to Fordham in the Bronx,
Oh,
so
yeah.
20-minute train ride from the city. So what are some memories you have just hanging around with your buddies, going different places in the city?
Oh, I spent way too much time in like about 4 different bars that like we would. Yeah, I remember that so much on the weekends, because when we were in school, like I was in school at like 8 in the morning until 10 or 11 at night, like every 5 days a week. And then I come in on Saturdays and we do like these playwriting workshops from like until like noon. And then you're trying to catch up on work on Sunday. So there wasn't a lot of time to go off and go out and blow off some steam, but we did. I mean, we found
had your fun.
found our ways. Yeah. And some of those bars are still open today, you know, like all those, you know, over on 9th Avenue and stuff. And so it's kind of fun. When I came back to do this movie, I hadn't been back in New York in 20 years.
Wow.
I mean, like living here, you know. And so I called up a bunch of old friends that I hadn't seen, and we literally went to these same bars that we'd gone to. And it was like, wow, they're still here, and you know, different bartenders, but the same vibe.
That's the amazing thing. Some of these places just become institutions,
Yeah.
and they'll just be here forever and ever. It's a
Pretty cool,
thing.
yeah.
So speaking of institutions, obviously Juilliard has been the cream of the crop when it comes to acting schools. So is Juilliard properly hyped, overhyped in terms of what actually goes down, or you know, how would you describe your experience in terms of the pressure and all the different things you had to live up to?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, you know, I think it has the luxury of having had a certain standard of excellence that's, you know, that gets some of the most talented people to want to go there. And so when you already have the most talented people like going to that place, it keeps that talent pool pretty high. So there's a lot of really good actors that have come out of that school, and I think the training is you know, it was great for me. It was very challenging, very difficult, and especially at that time in your life when all you're trying to do is, you know, get the approval of your instructors is a little tough. But you know, I think when you take the pressure cooker of that institution and what that's like, and not just the pressure that they put on you, but the pressure you put on yourself, I think it's in, you know, to be able to flourish in that, it translates directly to going out and to being in the business, because you think it's pressure, like trying to do your monologue in front of your teacher. That's nothing compared to being on a set where there's 150 crew members and they're like, roll action, and you better be ready to do your job. So I think, you know, a lot of that stuff did translate, but most of the stuff that we did get taught there, the core of it is like classical theater. I don't, I every once in a while, because I still love it, I'll go do a Shakespeare play. But for the most part, none of that translates to film and TV, and it's like you learn how to have this big booming voice and speak, articulately on, to an audience of 1,200 people. That's not the same tools you need when you're in front of a camera.
Right.
And so, it was some things that, I don't think any of it was a waste, but like they don't necessarily directly translate, But their motto when I was there, and I think probably still is, was we're going to give you like a tool bag full of tools to use, and you choose what you need when you need it. But if we don't give you these, then we are not doing our job as instructors.
So probably one of the things that wasn't a tool bag was catching passes in the back of the end zone.
There was no sports program.
No sports program.
No.
So your first movie, The Replacements, you mentioned you're a huge Gene Hackman guy.
Yeah.
Gene's in the movie.
I was freaking out. It was amazing.
How crazy was that first experience for you on screen?
It was incredible. I mean, it was every sort of like boyhood dream to like play football, and I never did. I played water polo my freshman year of high school, and then I got into the theater and never looked back. And luckily, I chose the right path because I was never going to be a pro athlete. But to be able to have that experience, and we shot in Raven Stadium, and they shot during halftime of like a Panthers-Ravens game,
wow.
and to shoot all that ending stuff, we're catching the winning touchdown, and so that was like just every boyhood dream, But I know the director, Howie, was not necessarily prepared for me because I came in with all of this experience from Julliard, and man, you asked me to play a character, who's hearing impaired.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to do my research, and I came in with like notes and notes and notes about what we needed to do and not do as the character, and what jokes were appropriate, what were inappropriate. I didn't win all of those conversations, but like, he respected me and he appreciated it, and like. But he wasn't necessarily ready for
somebody that was so prepared for this
I was like,
little role in the movie.
Exactly. I'm going to make the most of this. This is a movie about a deaf tight end.
Right.
Like, so, right? I'm pretty sure that's
Yeah,
what
this is the whole story, right?
Yeah,
It's not about a former college football story.
No, that's a backstory. That's
it's, it's a coming of age story of a deaf football player.
Who finally gets his chance to play professional football.
Now, there was a little dancing in the movie, so you could
was.
apply that Julliard skill.
I did. That was one of my conversations too. I was like, one of my friends when I was at school was a dancer, and he was deaf in the dance division, and he was an amazing dancer. And so I started dancing, and one of the guys was like, "Wait, you can't dance that well." I'm like,
"Why not,
dude? I can still dance. Just because he can't hear doesn't mean he doesn't have the ability to move." And so I won that argument.
There you go. So you got that argument.
I got
you
that
got
one.
The rest of them.
Yeah.
So that movie was like 18 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So
2000.
2000?
Yeah, 2000. Yeah.
So at the time, did you realize it would be such a cult hit, or were you just thinking, you know what, it's the start of my career, we'll see how it all falls out?
That was it. I didn't think that it would still be on every fall.
You're flipping through the channels, and you're like, oh,
there it is
there
again.
It is.
But when it first came out, like Warner Brothers wasn't so keen on it because they had just done another football movie. I can't think of the name of that one now. That Oliver Stone directed. That was like the
Any
year
Given
before.
Sunday?
Any Given Sunday.
Yeah.
That's the one. And they
It's a
already
little
had
football fatigue at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And they know that like football movies don't really sell overseas that much, and so they liked it, but it it just is sort of okay at the box office. But it's like that Energizer Bunny that's like it just keeps airing, and football is more popular now than it was 20 years ago,
Right.
and so it's I think something that will stick around. But it's a fun movie, and
Yeah.
I think people enjoy it. It's one of those things that I find surprising, but so many people come up to me and be like, that's like one of our like movies that whenever it's on, we just leave it on and watch it, pick right up where it is and watch the whole thing from the get-go. And I'm like, that's impressive, and it's fun to be part of something like that.
Yeah, totally. And you can connect to your character, or Keanu's character,
Yeah.
or Gene Hackman's character,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Even the owner. There's so many different connective points in that movie that I think everybody can kind of find a little bit of something.
Yeah, I think so. And there's nothing like rooting for the guys that like, that never got their shot,
Right.
that like get their chance and they play for the love of the game. And I think, so often we get clouded by people's contracts and
Right.
this stuff that you think that these guys don't actually, have aren't doing this for the love of the sport, and they are. At the end of the day, like that gets a little lost, and I think that's the whole mode of the whole point of that movie is.
Definitely. So really easy to root for you in that movie. Maybe not so easy to root for Roy in The Office. A little bit of a different story.
No, very different. Yeah.
So thinking back to The Office and
Yeah.
just playing that role, what did you grab from in your own personal life, or maybe in people that you knew to play that character so distinctly for that stretch run?
That was like a nod to all of those bullies when I was in high school that were kind of meatheads. And I genuinely like drew from that. And I won't say who, but a specific person in mind that was like that was just a knucklehead, And so I loved whenever I got those jokes, like your art is the prettiest art of all the art. I mean, who says that? It's so good. But we had amazing writers, and the cast was so good, and we just had a blast on that, like from the get-go. And it was also another one of those things for us because the British one, Office was so great that everyone that was in it were all fans, and there was a reverence for it that everyone was, wanted to do justice because we loved it so much. And, it kind of took its own life and became its own show because, for an American audience, it had to kind of evolve. But that was when that show was on, we only had 6 episodes the first season.
Right.
And the numbers were not great. The only reason why they kept us on was we were the #1 downloaded show. And at the time, no one knew what downloaded meant. So they were just like, okay, that's something we can
keep it going.
Yeah, well, that's something we can point to. And and then between season 1 and 2, Steve's 40-Year-Old Virgin came out, and he was a movie star, but they still kept us in the back corner, that we were behind My Name is Earl, and they didn't spend any money promoting The Office. They spent it all on My Name is Earl, and they thought if everyone watched that, they'll continue watching The Office. And they did, and then eventually we started doing better numbers than Earl, and then they switched us, and then the rest is history. And I guess it was 9 years. I think it lasted, and
Pretty incredible.
That was a good run. That was fun.
And especially for you, somebody that had been at Julliard, you understand just the dynamics of what makes great theater and great comedy. And just to be a part of that, not only with the writers, but with the cast, just people that always kept you on your toes. That must have been a fascinating experience for you, that somebody that was just a junkie of film growing up, somebody that was in the theater, kind of combined everything together in that one show.
Definitely. And there was also a level of improv, too. I mean, not a lot of improv,
But a little bit,
but
yeah.
a little bit. I mean, it was intended to be performed as if it were improv, as if it were just coming right off the cusp. And, Steve would improv a little bit, and Brain would improv. But those were the clowns, and all the rest of us were kind of looking at them like, what the heck? And but yeah, it was a culmination of a lot of my experience in life that brought me to that. And the nice thing is we don't always get the opportunity to be on something with that many talented folks that you can, that a show, comes alive and becomes what that show became,
So when was the last time you watched an episode?
I haven't watched an episode in a long time. I don't even know. I kind of turn it off whenever it's on, but it will surprise me where I'll be walking in to get barbecue somewhere, and there's a TV, and there I am. I'm like, what the heck? This was 10 years ago. How's that still airing? And it's just on loop all over the place. I just did the Charlotte Hornets did not the Charlotte Hornets, the Charlotte Knights.
Right.
Yeah, did an Office night, and it was their biggest selling night besides 4th of July, and there were so many fans that came out, and they were just. They just loved it. And the thing that surprises me is that all these kids that are seeing it, because now it's on Netflix and Comedy Central, and it's just
The whole streaming crew now.
Yeah,
is in there,
these kids come up to me and they're like, I watch you every night before I go to bed. I'm like, that's creepy, but great. And they're like, I've seen it 5 times. I just keep watching it. And I can't remember when I obsessed about something that much. I mean, I loved Family Ties and Cheers when I was a kid, but I didn't have the ability to turn it on whenever I wanted to, and so it's got a life that's really unique.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I have a Dwight Schrute bobblehead on my
There you
on my
go,
desk
right on.
there. So yeah, it continues to live on. So let's talk about Puzzle.
Yeah.
So you shot here in New York, and
did.
really interesting character in you playing Louis, because you have a wife who's been a certain way her whole life,
Yeah.
discovers this new passion, and that changes things for you. And we
Yeah.
were talking before, it kind of reminds you of somebody in your own life. So why did you want to be a part of this film, and what was it like playing that raw, emotional character?
Well, the first thing that attracted me was the script. It was a beautiful story. I felt like when I read it that I knew these people. Agnes, who Kelly MacDonald plays, reminded me a lot of like one of my best friend's mother growing up. Just some of the similarities with religion and how she dealt with taking care of all the boys in her family, and so I connected to that sort of immediately. And I knew that Kelly was attached and her father was attached when they had sent me the script. And I was a huge fan of hers and have been for years, and thought, so I'm reading it with her in mind. So I'm just thinking this is a perfect casting. And so all of those things excited me. There's something about Louis that for me, like, I felt like this guy who loves his wife and he loves his family, and even though he's limited with his ability to communicate and understand her, he's still sort of trying to reach her. And that's sort of the thing that I kind of grabbed onto and thought, the thing that Mark said to me from the get-go when we first met, he said, I want this guy to be just a mensch of a guy. Like, he's a good man who's, in this situation. And so we played with stuff, and there were certain elements of the script that kind of went a little bit further out of the realm of what I was comfortable with because I didn't want to make this guy a stereotypical heavy bad guy.
Right.
And I wanted you to have empathy for him and his plight as well. And so there were elements that we kind of had to pull back a little bit here and there, and then the ending changed a few times. There was the original ending that in the Argentinian film. And then as we were filming it, both Kelly and I were shooting a final scene, and we both felt like, I don't know, this just doesn't feel right. And Mark was so open to us and open to listening to sort of the best idea in the room, and he went back and started editing and realized that, there was another ending that needed to be done, and then we did a reshoot. And I think the way it ended is exactly the way it should end. But all of those conversations were so collaborative, with Mark and with Kelly, and that is what made the whole process so good. And for me, it was, as actors, as artists, we try to hold a mirror up to life, and this really felt like a really authentic telling of this world and these people and their struggles, and I think people can connect to that, and not just the story with Agnes and her journey, but also her sons and their like coming of age. It's like this mirror that kind of happens with her, that she sort of looks at her life under a new scope when her kids are getting out of high school, going into college. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people go through in that transition.
Yeah, no question about it. I think it's just a great lesson for everybody, whether you're 24, whether you're 44, it doesn't matter. You can always evolve, and even when you feel most confined, there's always something that you could potentially do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So, David, last one for you. When you think about your career, you've been on a hit show, you've done great movies, you've been to Julliard, you've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
What else would you still like to do?
There's a lot of stuff still left to do. Like I always felt like the great parts that I would want to play were going to be when I got older, and those are starting to come my way a little bit more, which is kind of fun and exciting. And right now I'm a dad. I just had a 6-month-old.
Congrats!
And that's the biggest role of my life, and so
how's that been for you?
It's
so
the
far?
best.
That's
It's
awesome.
the best. So it's sort of hard for me to think sort of career-wise, like what the next thing is, because right now I'm just like in that world, and that sort of just takes everything. I've done a lot of really cool things in my life, but having a son is by far better than any of those things. So
there you have it. Family man first. That's David Denman. Catchman Puzzle this coming Friday. David, it's been a pleasure.
Same.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.